Hi everybody, this is Joel Kennedy with Kennedy Violins. You know, learning spiccato is actually not that hard. If you know what to focus on and you know how to practice it, it doesn't take very much time. You can be on your road to having a pretty good spiccato stroke. Today, I'm going to show you how. Okay, so today I'm just going to do three things in this video. So number one, I'm just going to show you some really easy ways to practice spiccato so you can get the most out of your practice session. And number two, I'm going to tell you what to focus on so it makes your practice sessions much more efficient. And then three, I'll just give you some quick tips that'll just help make your spiccato journey a little bit easier. Okay, so first of all, what is spiccato? Well, spiccato is just a bouncing technique. It just means that your bow is bouncing. That's about it. So there's many different kinds of spiccato technique. There's fast techniques and slow techniques, but as long as you're bouncing your bow, that's spiccato. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you want to start practicing spiccato is find the balance point of your bow, right? So that's the point of your bow that it naturally just wants to bounce. So what you want to do is just take your bow and put your finger out, and then, you know, find the point at which your bow wants to balance itself, okay? So that's where you're gonna first start practicing your spiccato. Now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put some tape on either side of that bounce point, and that's gonna tell us where to bounce our bow, okay? So I'm gonna mark that with my finger, and I'm gonna get some tape and put that on here. Now I've taught spiccato to a lot of students over many years, and this is just, you know, I've got it distilled down to some very easy steps that makes it very simple so anybody can learn spiccato pretty quickly. Okay, so now I know where to bounce my bow. Okay, so now what you're gonna do is you're just going to practice bouncing your bow in that same exact spot. And your goal is to always bounce the bow in the same spot in between those tapes. So what I suggest in terms of how to practice it is get your metronome out. Now the metronome is really important because consistency is key. So get your metronome out, and I suggest putting your metronome on, like, let's say, you know, 80 to 88, something like that. So for this example, I'll put it on, like, you know, 88. And you'll just want to bounce open strings at first, right? And you'll want to bounce on all open strings because spiccato will feel different on every string. Okay, that's about it. And then you'll want to speed it up. So you'll want, after you get pretty good at that, then you want to speed it up to about, you know, 5 notches higher or something like that. But I'll put mine on, like, you know, 108, right? Just so you get the idea. Okay, now you'll want to get the metronome up, you know, a fair speed here. Make sure it's nice and even. Okay, so after you do that, then what you want to do is start putting fingers down, right? And I suggest practicing small scales, you know, really short scales on each string. And then as you get better, then you can start, you know, playing longer scales, you know, a full octave, 2 octave, 3 octave scales. And once you start putting fingers down, the spiccato will feel different. So that's why you want to practice. But scales are great. So you always want to practice most of what you do, you know, with your exercises and whatnot with scales, because scales are just so good. Okay, that's about it. And then you just start speeding up the spiccato. So you want to get it so you're fairly quick. That's about 160, I think. And then you can practice bouncing a couple times per beat. that on all strings. Okay, so but the important thing to remember about practicing is that you want to use the metronome because it gives you that consistency. You want to start out really slow so it's really easy so you can get the basic stroke, and then just build the speed. That's all it is. So the basic spiccato technique is actually not that difficult. It's just time. You just have to put the time in. So you just gradually build the speed, and then you'll develop more control all the time. Okay, so that's basic. That's a basic way that you can practice spiccato. Okay, so now let's talk about what to focus on. Now, there's a lot of different aspects of spiccato to focus on. So it's kind of difficult to know, maybe you don't like what you're hearing, or maybe it's not working as well as you'd like. You just want to focus on a few things, and if you focus on these few really important things, then your spiccato is going to improve very quickly, very easily. So first of all, you want to make sure that you're focusing on using the same part of the bow every time. So that's the point of that tape, right? So I'm always bouncing the bow in exactly the same spot, right? You don't want to find yourself doing, right? Bounce in the same spot on that bow every time. Okay, number two is you want to make sure that you're bouncing on the same part of the string on your instrument every time. Now I suggest that you focus on bouncing the bow in the middle of the bridge and the fingerboard. Just bounce right in the middle, okay? Just aim for that spot. So when you're bouncing, make sure that you're not sometimes bouncing towards the fingerboard or towards the bridge. It's in the same exact spot. Okay, now the other thing that you want to focus on is you want to make sure you're using the same length of hair every time you hit the string, okay? So you're going to be using, about this much, which is about 1/4 inch or 1 centimeter of hair every time you hit the string. So make sure every stroke uses the same amount of hair. So not or something like that, but the same amount of hair. Okay, so just to sum that up, you want to make sure that you're bouncing the bow in the same part of the bow, you're bouncing the bow on the same part of the string, and you're bouncing the bow using exactly the same amount of hair every time that you bounce. And as long as you use the metronome and you do it with the metronome and you're very consistent, then your spiccato will get better and better every time. Okay, so now some quick tips, right? When you practice your spiccato, you're going to notice a few things help you along the way. But in order for you not to have to discover these things, I'm just going to tell you before you start practicing, so you'll see these things and you'll know that I already mentioned them, and then you'll know that you're on the right track. So first of all, you want to make sure, as I've mentioned before, you always use the metronome. Remember, practicing spiccato is about consistency. Consistency of timing, consistency of stroke, consistency of placement, consistency of sound. You want to be consistent, so you want to use a consistent device, and that is the metronome. So number one, always practice the spiccato stroke with the metronome. So number two, you want to angle your bow slightly when you're bouncing your bow. So avoid bouncing your bow with a completely flat hair. Try pronating your bow slightly. So you'll actually be targeting the bottom third of the hair on your bow. So that's going to make it a little bit easier to bounce. The bow will want to bounce a little bit easier when you angle your bow, and also it'll make it easier to create a quality sound. The flatter your hair is, the harder it's going to be for you to create a sound without scratches. So just turn it a little bit. So instead of this, hear the sound difference? Here's flat, here's non-flat, here's flat. Here's flat, non-flat. So it gives it a little bit warmer sound. Okay, so number three is you want to make sure that your right hand is as flexible as possible. Now, I've mentioned this many times in my other videos, but you want to make sure that your pinky is bent and your thumb is flexible on the bottom of the bow as well. So bent pinky on top of your bow, not a straight pinky, and you want a flexible thumb at the bottom. It doesn't have to be bent like this all the time, but you don't want it to be locked, right? So you will be able to practice bouncing your bow with a stiff pinky. But the problem is that you will hit a brick wall. It will take you quadruple the time to learn spiccato stroke with a straight pinky, and you're going to hit a brick wall at some point, and you're just not going to be able to do advanced techniques like let's say like a sarrié. Right? Those are only possible if you have a relaxed hand, or like let's say a ricochet, right? So these kinds of advanced techniques, you really do need a relaxed pinky to be able to do that. Okay, so the fourth tip is that you should know that the faster your spiccato is, the point that it bounces on the bow will be different. Okay, so that's why, no, I tell you where to find the balance point on your bow, and you put the tape there. But the fact of the matter is that the faster your spiccato is, the higher up in the bow that your bow will want to bounce, okay? So when you do a slow brush stroke, it's going to be in that spot. But as you speed it up, your bow will actually want to bounce in a higher part. So even when you're doing like a sarrié, right? It's going to be wanting to bounce all the way up here, but we started down here. So that's just one thing that you should understand. So as you pick up the speed, just know that it's going to slowly migrate up your bow if you're doing it properly. The last quick tip that I will give you is to let you know that the faster your spiccato is, the less vertical height that you'll have on your spiccato. So you will bounce less high. So for example, if you got a slow stroke, right? I'm doing most of the work and the bow is bouncing high. So I'm controlling a lot of the descent and catching it and raising the bow. But as your stroke gets faster, then the bow starts doing more of the work and the bow bounces much less. So go from this. So to use the sarrié example again, you see the bow is bouncing very little. It's bouncing very little because it's fast. When you do the slow stroke, right, then your stroke will be a lot higher up. Okay guys, so I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, just put them below the video here. And I answer most of the questions on the YouTube, social media as well. Just DM me on Instagram or message me on Facebook. Be happy to answer any questions. If you want to see more of my videos, just go to Joel's Corner on KennedyViolins.com, and I got all my videos there. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Because I do a video every week, so hit that alert bell so you get a notification. And of course, don't forget, here at Kennedy Violins, we're all players and teachers. So if you have any questions about anything, just feel free to contact us anytime. We're always happy to help you out. Thanks.